Several years ago, my now fiance Ian and I had our first big fight. So I called my mom in tears. She listened to me cry for a while, and then she said, "This is good, because you need to have like 8 big fights with your partner before you can get married." Getting through arguments is how you come to trust that you can handle the next one. That's how you learn that a fight is not the end. So this maternal wisdom came to mind for me this week while reading about the aftermath of the golden calf incident in this week's Parsha, Ki Tisa. Moses is up on Mount Sinai speaking with God, but he's taking a long time. The people fear that God and Moses have abandoned them. They ask Aaron to make them Elohim asher yelchu lefanenu, a God that will go before us. He fashions a golden calf. The people exclaim, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." Aaron builds an altar before the calf, and the people bring sacrifices and celebrate with food, drink, and dancing. God sees the boisterous idolatry and is furious, ready to wipe out Israel. Moses manages to talk God down, and God renounces the absolute punishment. But things are not all right. Moses walks down the mountain, and when Israel sees him, he hurls the tablets of the law to the ground. The tablets shatter, the contract is ripped up, the ketubah is torn before Israel ever signs it. The rupture between God and Israel is ugly and violent. Moses enlists men of the tribe of Levi to go on a rampage for God, killing 3,000 of their siblings, neighbors, and kin. God too sends a plague as punishment for Israel's idolatry. We are not told how many people die. Let's take a moment to reckon with the horror of this. I believe that this parsha teaches us something about how relationships move on after real ugliness, but no relationship should continue after violence. As someone who believes the Torah contains moral wisdom as a collection of stories about Israel's encounters with God, but is not history, I understand this violence as Torah speaking in metaphor. This episode to me represents the worst thing that Israel and God's relationship can withstand. For each of us, the worst thing that the relationship can withstand will be different. Not violence, which is disqualifying for a continued relationship, but perhaps this worst thing is infidelity. Perhaps it is financial recklessness, expression of contempt, or a sustained period of emotional absence, maybe withholding essential information from a partner or divulging a secret. It will look different for each relationship. How do we move past real ugliness, not abuse, that occurs in relationships that are still worth keeping? In our parsha, we are told that God is angry at Israel, and I have to imagine that Israel is angry at God, but both parties commit to reconciliation. There is a relational shift, something more than returning to the way things were before the golden calf incident. Rather, God and Israel, represented by Moses, rebuild their relationship from the ground up. They start by getting reacquainted. Israel has yearned to know God better, more intimately. And now, in 2 ways, God reveals more of God's self. First, Moses, craving closeness, begs to actually see God. God tells him that this isn't possible, that a person cannot see God's face and live. Instead, God offers an alternative. Moses stands in the nook in a rock. God's hand shields Moses while God passes him, and Moses catches a glimpse of God's back. And second, God tells Israel about what God is all about. God says, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum ve'chanun, Erech Apayim be'rav chesed ve'emet, Notzer chesed la'alafim, Nosei avon va'fesha ve'chata'a ve'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, giving kindness to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. These words would become known as the 13 attributes of mercy. They are a theme in our Slichot and High Holiday liturgy and a core of Jewish theology. But why is God calling out Adonai, Adonai? Our rabbis understand these lines as God teaching about who and what God is. The 13 attributes originate not as prayer, but as God's self-description. This is God letting Israel in. Perhaps the golden calf incident is the wake-up call God and Israel both need. The covenant requires that Israel worship God exclusively, but it also requires God to not just keep and protect Israel, but to be in relationship with Israel. Israel needs both awe of God and intimacy with God. On his way down from Mount Sinai, holding the second pair of tablets, Moses sees the assembled Israelites. This time, there is no golden calf. Israel waits patiently for the Torah. In the rabbinic imagination, this moment represents the wedding between Israel and God. Heaven and earth are the witnesses, the Torah is the ketubah, Mount Sinai is the chuppah. And Moses glows. The skin of his face is radiant. The Hebrew reads, Karan or panav, there were horns of light from his face. Rays or beams of light emanate from Moses. On his triumphant descent, Moses is changed dramatically. He is radiant, so in love with God, he glows. This week, Ian and I started drafting our ketubah. As liberal Jews, our ketubah will be non-traditional. We are thinking about promises to be lifelong partners, to care for one another, to study Torah together, be patient with each other, support one another at the time of dying, and mend the world together. We promise to be fair and kind to each other. The odds are good that Ian and I will argue again, and we hope that when we do, we can turn to our ketubah to read the commitments we made when we were glowing with love. We hope to approach the inevitable conflicts ahead with compassion and faith that restoration is possible. When we are hurt terribly by someone we love, we ask ourselves if we want to stay in relationship with that person. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer should be no. But if the answer is yes, if all the good of the relationship outweighs the bad, and if we are able to work through the lowest moments, we find that the repaired relationship looks different, hopefully stronger. Perhaps on the other side, we, like Moses, will come out transformed, glowing with love rekindled, even brighter than before. Shabbat Shalom.